Hello and welcome to the Vaults of Terra. My name is Ed and today we're going to be continuing with our overview videos with a quick look at the Imperial Palace and the Adeptus Custodes. Now, the Adeptus Custodes, also known as the Guardians, the Watchers of the Throne and the Thousand Companions, are the guards who defend the Imperial Palace and the Golden Throne, and they are also the personal bodyguard of the Emperor. Now, a small elite of 300 Custodes, known as the Companions, form the Emperor's personal bodyguard and never leave his side, controlling everything that happens within the throne room, with the rest of the Custodes never leaving Terra itself. The Adeptus Custodes is a department of the Adeptus Terra, but are answerable only to the Emperor and their own leaders. Now, the organisation's leader carries the title of Captain General, and due to the importance of the Adeptus Custodes, he often holds a position in the Senate of the High Lords of Terra. Now, generally the Custodes are larger and much more powerful than Space Marines, however they are much more like the Thunder Warriors from the unification of Terra at the beginning of the Great Crusade, as they were created by a similar process, rather than the Astartes whose process was created a bit later. Now, out of armour, the uniforms of the Custodes are boots, leather breeches, and long black cloaks. Their torsos are naked and their tall brazen helms are enclosed, giving them a threatening and anonymous appearance. They are ancient and highly ornate helmets, incorporating advanced protective equipment and communicators, and can be seen from a long distance away, showing the presence of the Custodes when they are around. Originally, the Custodes used the colour red in their uniforms, but this was altered to black following the confinement of the Emperor to the Golden Throne. Now, the Custodes also carry Guardian Spears, which are power weapons with incorporated bolters on the end, that have been carried by the Custodes since before the Emperor's confinement to the Golden Throne. This weapon is closely associated with the Custodes and is depicted on their banners and badges. Now, historically, the Custodes were known as the Legio Custodes, and the original Custodians were the first genetically altered warriors created by the Emperor during the Terran Unification Wars, before even the Thunder Warriors. They served as the Emperor's personal bodyguard, and the genetic enhancement that forms the Custodes is different from and long predates that of the process used to create Space Marines, with rumours that their high-level modifications grant them virtual immortality, compared to the Space Marines which merely have a very long lifespan. Now, during the Great Crusade, the Custodes always kept a guard with the Emperor for his protection, but also travelled as individual envoys across the Imperium in order to carry out his will. Originally, their equipment matched that of the most powerful Space Marine legions, and their equipment would later go on to influence the equipment of the Grey Knights. After the Horus Heresy and the interment of the Emperor, they abandoned the use of their armour and changed their colours from red to black, as mentioned previously. Now, during the Age of Apostasy, many thousands of years later, the Custodes re-emerged from the Imperial Palace briefly during the siege of the Ecclesiastical Palace on Terra in the reign of Gorge Vandire. They attempted to assist in the removal of Vandire, and their commander convinced the leader of the Brides of the Emperor who were protecting Vandire to return with them and enter the presence of the Emperor himself. Whatever happened during that moment is unknown, but the effects resulted in the Brides of the Emperor rebelling against Vandire and ending the Age of Apostasy themselves. Now, while the Custodians often fought as lone operatives during the Horus Heresy, it was not uncommon for them to work together in groups for special circumstances. However, the Emperor never intended for his Custodes to form part of the legions. This was the role that the Astartes were meant to take. This lack of military mentality is also reflected in their mindset and training. They do share a genetic kinship with their fellow Custodes, but no Custodes has ever felt the same bonds of kinship and brotherhood as the Astartes do. They act individually, they even care for their own weapons and equipment, and are trusted to operate at their highest levels of standard without need of any ceremony or parades in order to show it off. Their individuality is also reflected in the fact that the process required to produce them is not as refined or as simple as that of the Astartes, and they are not mass-produced as the Astartes are. Each is recruited, modified, and trained individually, and the process is so cost-intensive for each Custodes that it would be impossible to make more than a few Custodes at a time. One thing the Custodes do have in common is the awarding of names. A Custodes is given a name for each battle or mighty deed they take part in the Emperor's service, with their names getting longer and longer as time passes. An example was Constantine Valdor, who obtained 1,932 names prior to the assault on Terra by Horus's forces. Such names are inscribed onto the inside of the warrior's battle armour, if he has any, and is a mark of pride. Now, the training for the Custodes differs immensely from that of the Astartes, as they are bodyguards rather than soldiers. They are trained in the art of assassination, both improvised and advanced, in order to counter assassination attempts on the Emperor. It is common for several custodians to be on detached duty for this training, known as the Blood Games, so they remain vigilant against developing threats. They are also well versed in the political etiquette of Terra, and have been known to act outside Imperial law in order to influence noble houses and investigate any potential threats to the Emperor, a role no Astartes could be expected to fulfill due to their lack of social graces due to their training as warriors. Now, this political knowledge and the ability to operate outside battle allows the Custodes to integrate well with Imperial society and maneuver political entities in the Imperial hierarchy. Now that I've mentioned the Custodes, what I'm going to talk about is the Imperial Palace, as this is something we've not really touched on before. Now, the Imperial Palace is a vast construct that covers a large part of a continent on Terra. It is divided into the inner and outer palace, and is built to absolutely monumental proportions. As seen from orbit, it consists of connected kilometres-high monolithic and pyramidical structures, marked with landing pads and covered with both orbital and ground-based defence weaponry. Originally it was merely a palace, but was turned into a nigh impregnable castle by Rorgal Dawn, Primarch of the Imperial Fists before and during the Horus Heresy. Now, on the outskirts of the palace rest the massive Titanoliths, monuments to the Primarchs and the Space Marine legions they commanded, although both the Unknown and Traitor Primarchs' pedestals now stand vacant. The outer palace is a heavily urbanised and populated area as any hive city. Adepts numbering in the billions work and live within the palace, along with a population of destitute non-adepts, many of whom are pilgrims who have no way of leaving Terra and returning home. Now, the Adeptus Arbites, not the Custodes, are responsible for maintaining order within the outer palace, especially outside official buildings, where they are often thronged with queues and lines of people who seek employment within the administratum. Shock troopers are usually deployed to quickly put down the vicious queue riots that occasionally erupt. Now, the palace is the heart of the administratum and the seat of the High Lords of Terra, allowing them to order and manipulate the vast Imperium and control it utterly. Without them, the Imperium would lose all access to its history and its databanks, meaning the Imperium would lose a sense of its own history and probably collapse under its own weight. Now, the inner palace, known as the Sanctum Imperialis, is the massive throne room at the heart of the palace, where the machinery for the Golden Throne, which keeps the Emperor's few living cells alive and provides an anchor point in the warp for his mighty spirit, is located. Tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus constantly maintain the Golden Throne, and in an arena before the Emperor himself, Psychers are soulbound to Imperial service as astropaths. Now, standing between the inner palace and the outer palace is the massive Eternity Gate, forged of the strongest materials. 2 Imperial Titans of the Legio Ignatum stand there in an eternal vigil which they share with 10,000 guards of the Adeptus Custodes. In fact, so large is the Eternity Gate that the Titans could actually walk through and into the Imperial throne room, although that would probably be highly unlikely unless they were attacking the Imperium. Now, along the grand hallway to the gate, hundreds of banners line the way, carried into battle by the Emperor's greatest heroes from the very founding, with the thought that as the Emperor was honoured by these banners, so the Emperor honours the men who wielded them by having them in his presence. Now, at the end of the hallway is the gate itself. It is massive and is forged of tempered adamantine layers, with ceramite on top. Now, its outer face is covered with gold, with an image of the Emperor in the days of the Great Crusade, standing victorious over his broken enemies. It should be noted that during the Siege of Terra, it was the Primarch Sanguinius who alone defended this entrance from the hordes of chaos who came to overrun the palace when no other could withstand the assault. So, that's everything I wanted to mention today. Thank you for listening to the video. If you have any comments, leave them in the comments section below. If you have a question, again, you can ask me via personal message, or you can go to the Vox Relay, the Vaults of Terra forum, where the community is happy to answer any questions and talk about the lore of Warhammer 40,000 in general itself. So, thank you for watching. See you next time on the Vaults of Terra.